This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China is currently convening in Beijing, and the world is facing unprecedented economic, social, and political challenges. What is so special about the meeting? How does it reflect China's social and political systems? And what's the significance of the event? To help us discuss these questions and more, I'm joined today by Grzegorz W. Kolodko, former Deputy Prime Minister of Poland. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thank you, Mr. Kolodko, for accepting our interview. So what's the relationship between China and Poland, between China and Europe like in your eyes?
Well, Poland is already for almost 20 years member of the European Union, and therefore we shape our relations with China within the framework of a bolder approach of the European Union. But that is Polish relations with China, were very friendly and based on pragmatic economic and political cooperation since the first days of China's People's Republic already 73 years ago during the previous Polish socialist system. And now when we moved to different political arrangements, these relations are based on pragmatism. There is a lot of Chinese economic and cultural activity to be seen in Poland. I wish there will be more of us present in the Chinese cultural and economic exchange, but the relations are positive. We were not following the American pressure to be more skeptic or say even anti-Chinese. We develop our economic relations, the exchange of culture and students. And I'm teaching my international students at famous Beijing Normal University Belt and Road School. Now there were some problems because of the pandemic, because we cannot travel to China and the other way around. But President Xi Jinping visited Poland, the same the previous Chinese leaders. And I think it is not just a symbol. It has a political, but also an economic meaning that President Duda was attending the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics, and he met with President Xi Jinping. As for Europe, it's also based on pragmatism. Plenty of European countries, especially the members of the European Union, because we must be aware that there are the countries outside of the European Union, but they are still European. Say, starting from Great Britain, but also Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, the rich countries, and the countries lagging behind, like Serbia or Bosnia and Herzegovina or Moldova. And very many of them, this outside of European Union, but in Europe, they are looking towards China to get some assistance, to get some transfer of technology, to trade. But more than that, to take a part also in the Belt and Road Initiative. And China has seen this approach different of European Union than the United States. And I think that American approach to China is also somehow under the influence of more pragmatic but less ideologic approach which we exercise in the European Union. So it could be better, always. It could be better, but considering the all international atmosphere, the European Union relations with China are on the positive side of the exercise.
Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to the relationship between countries, it has a lot to do with understanding of each other, in this case, the understanding of China. I know you have been observing the Chinese development for more than 30 years, 33 years ago. This is your first trip to China. I wonder, what's your impression of China then and China today?
Well, China 30 years ago and China now, it's a very different country. I'm saying that one has to compare Chinese system, both a complex system, political and economic one, because it is just a complex political economic system with Russia on the one hand and with India. 30 years ago, Russia's GDP, at that time still part of the Soviet Union, was 3 times bigger than Chinese. Now Chinese is 7-fold bigger than Russia's. This is the tectonic change the humankind never seen in the history of civilization. On the other hand, 30 years ago, in 1991, the GDP per capita in India was slightly higher than in China. In both countries, there were hundreds of millions of people living in extreme poverty. Now in India, we have more than 100 million people living in extreme poverty, according to the World Bank definition. No more, less than $1.9 per day on purchasing parity, and it has been erased completely in China. This is the extremely great success of Chinese economic policy, and one has to take it into account. So the question is, if China choosing 3 generations, 3 decades ago, a different political path, how would be now the social and economic situation in China? I think it would be much worse, much more similar, say, to India. And that makes some countries envy. They don't understand that we have to find a way, I mean, they in Washington or London, that we have to find a pragmatic, peaceful way to work arm with China, how to solve the global problems and how to take advantage of this stage of technological economic development for the benefit of our societies through the peaceful cooperation, not hostility. So the trade war between US and China was declared by the US. The second Cold War was started by US, and now the situation is getting much more complex. So also China is facing now more problems on the international scene than, say, it was the case 12 or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, China's progress and the achievement, massive achievement, it has a lot to do with the path it chooses, or the Chinese system, which you describe as Chineism, hybrid sort of between Chinese socialism or Chinese system with socialism with Chinese characteristics, or Chinese capitalism. From an economist's point of view, what is Chineism? Tell us more about that. How significant is it for people in the West, probably, to understand how China works?
It's a good question, because all the time we have to hear and we have to make a point. Is China communism, or is it Chineism, or if you wish, following the Chinese approach, socialism with the Chinese characteristics, or is it capitalism, or what kind of capitalism? So this alternative, black or white, doesn't apply. China is neither black nor white. China is neither communism or capitalism. It's a hybrid system which has some features of socialist based on state property, planet economy, socially oriented, and some features typical for liberal capitalist economy, free enterprise, private property, deregulation, inequality, unfortunately, and so on. But if you will take a closer look, it is neither black nor white. It is neither capitalism or socialism. So it's another quality. I call it Chineism. So this is the hybrid system, which is pretty good, far from perfect, but pretty good, taking advantage of the power of invisible hand of market with the visible hand, maybe even too much visible sometimes, hand of the government. But the difference between such a mixture elsewhere say, in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt or in Brazil, if you wish, is that in case of China, it is being supported by meritocracy. In case of China, we have hybrid system of market and government and state, but which is a meritocratic one. The economic show, the political show, is run by educated, competent, responsible, accountable people, which I cannot say with due respect, say about the countries like Nigeria or Saudi Arabia, Russia or Bangladesh. So the question is how it happens that China is able to combine a little bit of democracy, a little bit of authoritarian system, a lot of market, a lot of government intervention, but still under the stewardship of meritocracy. And this is the recipe, the systemic recipe for incredible Chinese economic success. But there are still the problems. And because there are the problems, what you know much better in China than anybody else in the wide world, the question is how, by what means China will progress in the future.
Yes. Let's shift the gear to the National Congress of the CPC, very important event. So tell us, how Europe views this meeting. Now, how do you view this meeting, from probably European point of view, stance? What are the expectations for the meeting? I would say probably for those in particular like yours who are following the Chinese development, what do people expect out of this meeting?
That is very important event, especially in the political system like there is in China, the Congress of the leading party in actually a monoparty political system. Many decisions are to be taken, or if one wish, publicized, because several decisions have been taken during the process, the difficult process of preparation to the Congress, and only now they will be made public. But what we are looking for, well, we want to know how China is going to continue economic reforms to give a little bit more power to this invisible hand of market and a little bit less to this too often intervening visible hand of government, because it is also important for business from other parts of the world, how open China will be for interacting economically, for the flow of direct investment, portfolio investment, the capital market liberalization, and so on. Definitely, we are looking to hear much more what China is going to do in the forthcoming years as far as natural environment protection and counteracting the warming climate are concerned, especially the latter. Warming the climate is something what we have to do together.
We'll speak of course, the important meeting and also the Chinese stance toward the world. Many people are calling for continuous reform and opening up to the outside world, and probably that's also a way to to deal with or defuse this Cold War from Washington, to contain the rise of China. Of course, because of the efforts of the Second Cold War, we are seeing that the reverse of globalization. Some people would call it deglobalization. So, what's your response? In what way, we can do probably because globalization benefits every country.
One has to understand that Cold War is not just an incident. It is deliberately being fueled. Cold War is devastating for global cooperation and social and economic development, but it is very fruitful for some lobbies. Cold War is very fruitful, beneficiary for military industrial lobby, very positive for energy lobbies because of soaring energy prices in the atmosphere of the Cold War. So we need the leaders which will be forced enough to break the neck of the powerful military industrial lobbies in their country and to say, stop this idiocy, stop this fly of the moth to the fire, because it is getting dangerous. Cold War can become hot war, not word hot war, but we do have conflicts here and there, not only in eastern Ukraine, in some other parts of the world too. So the situation is getting dangerous, and I can't see any chance to turn the corner and to reverse the process as by the proper leadership. Leadership here is a critical one. We do need leaders on the national and international scene stage, which will be able to face their own people and to say them, stop this stupid Cold War, military build up. We don't have enough resources to fight pandemic, to fight warming the climate, to fight the poverty. That is where we have to spend the money. But we are going otherwise. In my country, in Poland, the parliament, without any voice against, has raised the military spending to 3% of GDP by law. Now we have to spend 3% of GDP on so-called defense. And at the same time, the government has to explain to teachers or to doctors that there is not enough money for raising the quality of healthcare or education services. This is very short-sighted policy. And of course, the argument is there is the war, there is the conflict. We have to protect ourselves. Okay, we can protect ourselves by ending the Cold War, by negotiations, by sitting at the table, not by getting ready to shoot to each other. From this perspective, it is very important not to make any such mistake as Mr. Putin has committed as far as Eastern Ukraine is concerned, because this conflict may escalate. It can last much longer than it was presumed at the onset. It can escalate. It can be much more devastating for the world as such. And from this perspective also, this Congress of Chinese Communist Party somehow is important because China is so important in the world. And we would like to hear what good propositions are coming from China. And the good propositions are the ones which will be taken seriously by the partners in the West, United States, European Union, Japan, NATO. And for that reason, it is also important what will be the follow-up on the international scene. We do not need more hostility. We may need to say again, as we used to say 50 years ago, make love, not war. It's not naive, it's not utopian. This is a must if you want to survive and to continue the social and economic development in a peaceful way. It is possible. Not everybody has to follow Chinaism. Not everybody has to follow so-called liberal democracy or neoliberal capitalism. There's plenty of room for all of us. Yet now the movement, the traffic in the world became dangerous because the street lights are malfunction in this world of us. But to all of these challenges, there are the solutions. But that does imply that the problem will be solved. The things can get much worse. And for the time being, they are getting worse, day after day. So let's hope that day will come when we will start to move into the other direction, that the things will improve. It's possible, it may happen, but by all means, it is not going to happen without this special, extraordinary effort.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Mr. Kolodko. Thank you for your time and insight. Let's have a break. We'll continue our discussion right after this. Coming up next, earlier I spoke with Djoomart Otorbaev, former Prime Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic, for his views on China's cooperation with Central Asia and its growing role in the global community.
China will be leader of the world, leader of Asia, growing Asia, and we are neighbors. China should look into the creating new Silicon Valley. So the world, current world need leadership. The world will wait for Chinese initiative in that respect.
Welcome, Mr. Otorbaev. We have this most important event in China that everyone is talking about, in the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. So why is this meeting so important to China and probably to the world?
This meeting indeed very important, and there is no secret that the Communist Party of China is leading the way for the nation and the country ahead. And the importance of this 20th Congress is that after 18th Congress in 2012, a Chinese president put ahead the idea of two centenaries. And the first one was completed in 2021 when China celebrated anniversary of the creation of its Communist Party. And all nations should be proud that all tasks which were placed in the 18th Congress were fulfilled, both in terms of economic development, in poverty alleviation, in structuring the goal for environmentally friendly country. Everything was achieved. But there is another task, is even more ambitious, to 2049, when country will be celebrating 100th anniversary of creation of People's Republic of China. Then the country should be the prosperous society, democratic society, socialistic society. And I think that in 20th Congress, a real start for 2049 will be given. Mm-hmm. Not only saying general words, but placing ahead very particular, precise, concrete plan of action for all people around the country, as well as action of the country on international arena. That is why the importance of the Congress cannot be overestimated, especially for its neighbors, us in Central Asia, because we will be feeling and understanding the main achievement of China for the next 10 years and beyond.
Mr. Otorbaev, you mentioned earlier about possible impact by the Chinese development over Central Asian nations. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely, yes. We are neighbors. The first statement about the Belt and Road Initiative President Xi made in Kazakhstan, in Central Asia, 9 years ago. Next year will be 10th anniversary of Belt and Road Initiative. So we're really looking after high quality cooperation with China, because China will be leader of the world, leader of Asia, growing Asia, and we are neighbors. So we're really looking for improvement and further strengthening of our economic, social, diplomatic, and other relationships with China. We wanted to get involved more in high technology cooperation with China. Central Asian population is high educated. We need investments from Chinese investors and the government into bringing us closer in the 21st century technologies. In that respect, everything is possible. And I already mentioned in the past that China should look into the creating new Silicon Valley with invitation of all talents around the world, and to create talents competition within this institution, within new Silicon Valley of Asia of 21st century, where all talents around the world should be part of this new initiative.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Otorbaev, we know that right after the Chinese Party Congress, and then there will be the U.S. midterm election. So how will these two major events somehow affect the relationship between the two countries?
It's the two biggest countries in the world, and they must work closer to each other. It was not Chinese choice that now there is a kind of misunderstanding, and some say about new Cold War between two greatest powers. So China always wanted to cooperate, but the other side is a little bit reluctant and seeing all this competition as zero-sum game, which is not correct. So all the world watching for this competition. Indeed, results of 20th Party Congress of Communist Party of China is critically important. And the goals which will be placed in front of all nations, including internal and external politics, is very important. United States, of course, they are absorb the internal matters. These days, it's a huge inflation, high interest rate, and increasing of energy prices, really making United States is difficult in front of difficult choice, either to continue confrontation or to make decision to go back to globalization stage, refuse to agree on the principles of zero-sum game. And of course, midterm elections are critically important. There's a lot of speculation what will happen then. And then if it will be change of kind of power in Congress, in Senate, of course, it will be major policy corrections in the United States, also in front of the upcoming presidential elections. So in that respect, I think that all world should be helping to both countries to move back into cooperation and welcoming globalization.
Mm-hmm. Well, briefly, Mr. Otorbaev, how do you see, the meeting and also China's role internationally as the country continue, say, for the next decades or more, as you mentioned, until 2049? The plan obviously is to continue to rise. What do you see the role of the country in international community?
It's enormously important. The current world need leadership, fair cooperation, big powers, small powers. Of course, leading countries in the world have a major responsibility to bring world to the more fair stage, to fight the poverty, to fight inequality around the world. In that respect, the world will wait for Chinese initiative in that respect. And in that respect, global development initiative, for example, is critically important. So global development initiative need concrete measures and steps on how we should go together forward. In that respect, more dialogue, more debates, more discussions, more brainstorming would be needed to find concrete measures on how we together will go ahead to the more fair humanity, more fair future world.
Well, on that note, we conclude this show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.